reflects and defines our personal and cultural identity. I think that many social groups define themselves in part by what they do eat and what they don't eat. Other people eat that. We eat this. Other people eat that. And there are culture-specific foods that are enjoyed in some cultures that other cultures can't get a handle on at all. The ways that we eat, what we do eat and what we don't eat, is a strongly part of our definition of who we are. I think it's also very important to understand that how we eat is one determinant of health. And in that sentence, I want to underline the word one. Eating is not the sole determinant of health. Eating, how we eat, is one aspect of lifestyle. There are many other aspects of lifestyle that have to be considered in looking at people's health. But eating's important, and one reason it's important is that potentially you have total control over it. You can't always control the quality of air you breathe, the amount of stress that you experience, but really, when it comes down to it, you determine what goes into your mouth. And it's a shame to squander that control when it's there for you to use in the service of health. I also want to emphasize very strongly that my experience as a physician is that changing how you eat can be a very powerful strategy for managing disease and restoring health. As a physician who practices integrative medicine, I almost always recommend to patients that they make changes in diet. And I think that over the years, the benefits that I've seen, both in promoting health and dealing with specific disease conditions, is great. And this is really the basis of a new kind of medicine that I would call nutritional medicine. Let me give you one case example of nutritional medicine in action. Recently, I saw a 70-year-old woman whose complaint was lifelong asthma, very severe. She was dependent on steroids, had had many hospitalizations, and had to use a great deal of medication. She had grown up in Wisconsin and was a very heavy consumer of dairy products, which she always thought were very healthy for her. I told her that in many people, eating milk and milk products worsens asthma, and that it would be worth making an experiment of cutting that out. She was very surprised at that. She said no doctor had ever suggested that to her, and it was such a basic part of her diet. But she did the experiment, and after just a month of not eating dairy products, there was significant improvement in her asthma, particularly noteworthy because it was in winter when she was usually worst. This is just one example of how a dietary manipulation can be used to treat a medical condition. That's nutritional medicine in action. That's a field in its infancy at the moment. Infancy, in part, because nutrition is not taught in medical schools, as I said. There are two aspects to nutritional medicine that I think are important. The first is designing an optimum diet that will promote health and longevity. And the second is treating specific disease conditions through dietary change. And my hope is that in coming years, as doctors become more sophisticated about nutrition, that nutritional medicine will take its proper place in the realm of treatments. And good. And let me just touch on 7 key areas of lifestyle that I think are important. The first is diet, both knowing what foods to eat, what foods not to eat, how to prepare food for yourself, and so forth. Second is the use of dietary supplements. This is another area of great confusion. Many people tell me today that the experience of walking into a health food store is totally bewildering. And part of what I'd like to do is to give you some sense of which supplements are useful, which are not. I'm not in favor of taking a lot of pills, but I think there are some dietary supplements out there that are very useful that you should know about. Another key aspect of lifestyle is how you relax. How do you handle stress? What do you do to neutralize stress? We can't live without stress. That's impossible. Human life comes with stress. But I think there are strategies that you can do to neutralize stress, or at least protect your body from its harmful effects. 2 particular methods that I often recommend are breathing techniques. Simple breathing exercises that take very little time and no equipment and are very powerful. And another strategy is meditation, which doesn't necessarily mean putting on a robe and sitting cross-legged. Simply sitting and observing your breathing is a basic form of meditation. I think that exercise and physical activity clearly this is a key area of lifestyle. The more that I study exercise, and an idea that I have is that intense, isolated workouts are not necessarily the most useful form of physical activity. That rather, it's the sum total of activity throughout a day that really keeps you fit. I think it's good to move and be in motion and, all the little stuff, housework, going upstairs, gardening. It's that sum total of activity that I think really conditions the body and maybe more important than workouts. Another very important aspect of lifestyle that we inquire about very much of our patients is what I would call connectedness. I think living in isolation promotes illness. And whether that connection is to a spouse, a lover, friends, co-workers, pets, plants, nature, I think it all counts. But I think that you have to establish connections beyond yourself, or you're prone not only to psychological problems, but physical ones as well. I also feel that play is a very important aspect of lifestyle, and I always inquire of patients what they do for fun, what they do for enjoyment. And when people look off into space and say they really don't know, I worry. I think play and having fun is key. And by the way, I think it's also good to look at your attitudes toward your work. Is work something that you enjoy? Do you get satisfaction from it? I think having satisfying work is a key to a healthy life as well. And finally, I would emphasize the importance of rest. I think that our bodies need adequate rest. We need sleep of adequate amount and good quality. I think it's very good to learn how to clear your mind of disturbing thoughts before you go to sleep and so forth. At any rate, these aspects of lifestyle you have control over, and these are all areas in which you can work. And in talking to you tonight about diet and health, I don't mean to suggest that this is the only or the most important aspect of lifestyle in determining the whole equation of health. I really discovered the joy of cooking when I was in medical school. When I had a long stretch of being on the wards, I would come home in such awful states of mind. I would have to detoxify. And the way that I learned to do that, I would take a shower, change my clothes, and then I would cook something. And the act of chopping vegetables, cooking, manifesting what was in my mind centered me, made me relax, put me in a good space of mind. And it really has worked that way for me. By the way, I won't even go into great detail of what I got to eat when I was a medical student and the quality of food in hospitals and what's served to patients and what serves to doctors. That should be a national scandal. When you shop for food, it is very important to train yourself to read labels. We're fortunate to live at a time and a place when food labeling is as good as it has ever been. Just some basic principles. If I pick up a product and there are so many ingredients that they can barely fit on the label, I'll usually put that product back on the shelf. If it's a product, I often will think, if I were going to make this at home, what would I use to make it? And then compare what's in the product. And if there's too much there, that's not stuff I would use in it when I make it home, I put it back on the shelf. You should always check the calories that you're getting, the total calories, and there's something you have to be real careful of there, because you have to make sure that the serving size on the label is really what you would eat. I've seen bags of chips that I could easily eat half of, in no time, and the bag says this contains 12 servings, and the calories are given per serving. So that can be very deceptive. You want to make sure that the amount you eat is realistic. I think you also want to pay attention to the total fat content of that food. I think it's a good idea to look at listings for particular kinds of micronutrients, make sure you're not getting too much sodium there, for example, in a food, to make sure you're not getting too much saturated fat. These are all things that are available to you, and often it just takes a few seconds to look at it. But these are just some basic rules. And then there are some key words that my eye goes right to. If I see partially hydrogenated anything, I put it back on the shelf. These artificially hardened fats are very toxic for us. This is the kind of thing that builds up in used cooking fat, and many foods, most baked goods, all that stuff is full of partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, very bad for the health of our hearts and arteries, probably promoting of cancer as well. You don't want to eat that. So that's just an automatic rejection. So you really want to train yourself to be good label detectives. And then, I hope you will also discover the the joy of cooking and the ways that you can use food preparation. You know, it's a great thing to do with other people. It's also a great test of human